Thanks very much. So it's a continuation of our session before. This time, we really want to put an emphasis on what we've been doing with different research communities. I mentioned at the beginning that we see language as both something we're studying, like it's an object that we're looking at, but it's also the tool. And one of the things when language is the tool by which you do research, it's part of the infrastructure, it means you have a really multidisciplinary outlook. And that's something we really want to emphasize in this particular presentation, the way in which we're trying to work across HAS disciplines and actually beyond as well. The kinds of disciplines or sectors we want to work with, it goes from the GLAM public sector through to botanic collections, right? So that's getting well outside of HAS, to political scientists, policy, peak body, NGOs, community and Indigenous-led organisations throughout Australia and the Pacific. So we really want to emphasise that language data commons doesn't mean it's all about linguistics. Okay, so that's really, really important. There is some linguistics in it, of course, but there's lots of other stuff going on as well. So the team here to talk about it today, we have Robert McLellan, Green Man, and our program manager. We have Teresa Chan, who's going to be talking together with him. We have Monika Bednarek, Professor Monika Bednarek from University of Sydney, and Moises again from our tech and data lead. So I think maybe we just go to the next slide. So in this presentation, and then we'll hopefully have some time for questions and answers, we'll start by looking at the kind of training, consultation and support advice that we do, which is really across different sectors, disciplines. Then we want to emphasize this interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary or transdisciplinary, take your pick of the term you like, research through the tools and analytics that we have. You will learn something about swearing, including the F word. The real F word, not the funding word. And some other swear words. I won't say the words. Some linguists just like to roll them off their tongue. Because I'm doing research on swear words, it's like an excuse to just say them in public. But I'm not going to do it. I'm going to maintain my dignity. And so it's just going to be C word and F word. I can say bloody and shit, they're fine. So we'll get onto that somewhere in the middle. So somewhere in the middle of this presentation, you're going to learn about swearing. But there's lots of other really cool stuff as well. So I'll start with the training, consultation and advice and hand across to Robert and Teresa.
Right. So I'll deliver the section about training. So LDaCA has provided training on different skills tailored for different skill levels and for different audiences through a variety of in-person and online events. So we've covered skills like working with language data or analysing text, with a focus on computational methods. And we've catered for skill levels from novices through to those who do have experience with these kind of skills. And our audiences have been linguists, researchers, HDR students in humanities and beyond. And this slide shows 3 examples of training we have provided in the past. So on the left, we have ResBas, which is a digital research training festival. And at least in Queensland, it's still student-led. So here, introductory level material is quite suitable. So we had Sam Hames and Martin Schweinberger delivering a workshop introducing R for text analysis. And in case you're not already aware, R is a programming language often used for statistical analysis and visualization. At the top right, we have the Digital Humanities Australasia Conference, where the audience is presumably practicing researchers who have more of a literacy around digital methods, data, etc. In this case, we focus more on tools and other resources that LDaCA could offer to help them in their work. And finally, on the bottom right, we have a workshop about sustainable data, hosted by the Melbourne Data Analytics Platform, MDAP, over at the University of Melbourne. And as we were dealing with HDR students for this event, and they're still establishing their research methods and practices, we took them on a bit of a journey from theory right through to practice. So start with principles like fair and care, and eventually leading on to hands-on work with data management tools. Just speaking to what Michael said before about reaching beyond linguistics. So it's not just about language linguistics, even though we are a language data commons. So this was another event also with MDAP. We ran a workshop about using Hansard for HAS research, and this was delivered by Sam and Simon Musgrave. Hansard is a report of the proceedings of the Australian Parliament, and it's a rich source of data that appeals to many different disciplines. Some of them are listed here. So we've got history, political science, law, and so on. It's also a very complex and unwieldy data source if anyone's actually tried to grapple with it. And that can be quite intimidating for digital novices. But Sam and Simon, through this event, helped navigate those barriers to access, and they shared examples of actual research that used Hansard. So they had a history professor talking about his work with historical Hansards from before the 1900s. And they guided participants in exploring the data themselves. And finally, the type of training that I've mentioned so far has been really sort of the more traditional sort of events where there's an instructor and they're talking to a room, but then they're only together for like a few hours a day, something like that. But we've also done more informal, small group style training, and that's gone on for a more extended period of time. So for the last 3 years, we've offered the Graduate Digital Research Fellowship annually to HDR students who need help with specific aspects of their research. So these students would meet to participate in group activities, but crucially, they also separate out to work individually with a mentor or mentors, this case, Sam and Simon again. And some of the topics that they brought to the fellowship included things like designing an app to support young people after cancer treatment, stereotypes in Australian and Italian gaming communities, and spatial design of productive urban food landscapes. So once again, it's beyond language and linguistics. As a fellowship is roughly only 1 semester long, the aim isn't to end up with like a finished product of research as such, but to build up those digital research skills to guide them for the rest of their research project. So it's emphasizing the process, not the outcomes. And if you're interested, we're offering the fellowship program again next year, and you can also read about it on our blog. So I'll pass on to Robert now.
Thank you. So our next, I'll use this one. Is this one? Our next one is an example that I want to share with you from our colleagues at, this was a collaborative partnership. Our colleagues at UWA, the University of Western Australia, and Google. This paper explores how speech technologies like voice recognition can better support speakers of Australian Aboriginal Englishes, which is used widely across the country. Now, one of the things that it highlights is that most current technologies don't recognise or work well with these varieties, and that can lead to and reinforce social and digital exclusion for speakers of those languages. We often talk about, as those languages developed, you know, having to put on your best white fella voice for it to work well for you, or else it would not understand what you were saying. So this paper explores that And it also looks at the opportunities and the risks of designing speech technologies for Aboriginal English. And it also too emphasises the importance of culturally safe and, again, that participatory design aspect where communities are directly involved in shaping how the technology is built and used. It also calls for us for more support for all languages used by Indigenous communities, including contemporary and contact varieties, ensuring that the development happens with the communities, with them, not for them, that kind of thing. And so this example, you can see the extent of the ways in which we extend and work with our partners to support efforts like these. The next one I want to share with you looks at this one's around securing digital collections, particularly with the Batchelor Institute, who are one of our partners, but they are also responsible for the Call collection, which is an extremely large collection of Indigenous language materials. And so it's their responsibility to hold that archive, and it contains physical and digital materials. We are working with Batchelor to build a long-term digital archive to replace existing technologies and securing them from becoming obsolete. Now, this is on a technical front, but also they face physical challenges like humidity and humidity control and moisture in with the actual physical collections themselves. So it's quite a large, broad-reaching collection of data. One of our colleagues, Ben, he has particularly been working with Batchelor to make sure that the material is backed up and reformatted in the first instance. And then he's applying the pillars model to ensure that the materials are easy to maintain and update for future use. So I will elaborate on pillars in the next slide, actually. But first, I want to talk about the National Collection Strategy. Again, another one of our partners, First Languages Australia, have been leading this work with our support. And together we are collaborating on developing a new National Indigenous Languages Collection Strategy. Now, the original one was done back in 2013, so it is due for an update. Importantly, the strategy aims to improve access to Indigenous language materials held in institutional collections. Our colleague Nick provided a nice, concise elaboration on that previously, which alluded to the challenges of access for communities. It also will explore pathways for community-controlled management, and it will also identify I guess what types of supports communities need to manage and use their language data in ways that are appropriate and specific to their local circumstances. As well as delivering so this project is actually quite large in scale, and there is a lot of consultation that is happening, a lot of outreach and travel to various communities to really hear and document the voices of Indigenous language communities. But as well as there being a strategy that will be developed, there'll also be key recommendations for implementation that come out of that strategy. It will also include how-to guides aimed at community organisations. And I understand it will also include some short video stories which help capture that community voices even further. Now, pillars is the second part of this, which I want to just elaborate on. I guess I'd say we talk about this, the long-term preservability of well-described data, the long-term preservability of well-described data being a goal for us, a focus point for us at LDaCA, and there's some ways in which we go about doing this. One of those is the practice of packaging the data and the metadata together. The other one is around emphasising the importances of licenses and the fact that they're a crucial part of metadata. And the other one there is around using RO-Crate as a way in which we construct that and package it all together. A thing that we use to build that is the Crato metadata editor. for describing our metadata and structuring that. And the other one is the community language portal, which is an ONI portal. So share that as a background, but PILLAR specifically stands for the Protocols for Implementing Long-Term Archival Repository Services. And along with PT Sefton and many of our colleagues who had come together to form a working group, we designed these protocols. There are three main protocols in there, and it says that data must be portable, data must be annotated, and thirdly, governance must be in place. So that's portable, annotated, and governance. And across those three protocols, each of them extend to between 4 to 7 specific actions. So they're quite implementable. I'm going to now hand on to Michael and Monika.
Okay, great. So Michael and I are going to talk about a few examples where the LDaCA infrastructure has really fostered interdisciplinary research. So I'm going to start off by just talking about one tool that has seen different applications in research. So this tool is called the Quotation Tool. More on this later. It's developed at the University of Sydney by the team involved in LDaCA, including people from the Sydney Informatics Hub, Chao, who's here today. And it's been used to support other disciplines, PhD research, and international collaborations. So what is this tool? I'll just tell you a little bit about it so you understand the applications. So it's basically a text analytics tool that allows you to extract quotes and the speakers from newspaper texts. Or it could be one text, but most typically you'd have like a collection of newspaper articles. It then gives you the speakers, whatever is used to attribute the speech, like usually a verb like said, and it also gives you what the person actually said. So we've adapted this code with permission from the Gender Gap Tracker team in Canada that was originally developed for Canadian newspaper text, and it uses various NLP tools to process and extract that information. So basically, the user would upload their own newspaper datasets, and then it can use the tool to identify the quotes and the speakers and the verbs, and then they receive a spreadsheet for further analysis. So this is not the complete spreadsheet here, but I've just given you a little extract so you can see what is quoted, who said it, and then what particular verb they used that was used to attribute to them, which can be interesting. For example, if you think about the difference between someone said something versus someone claimed something, or someone admitted something, or confessed something, or those kinds of things. Lots of interesting nuances there. The other thing that the tool also allows us to do is to identify the entities that are quoted or that are actually mentioned in the quoted speech. So in this example, you can see here that Anna Pauls is identified as a person, and then Massey Uni is identified as an organization. We've got Australians, said Australians should accept. Australians are identified here as NORP, which basically stands for nationalities or religious or political groups. And so this kind of information, which you can see visualized here, is also included in the spreadsheet that is downloaded. So that's just a very brief glimpse into the functionality, but it hopefully gives you a little bit of an idea of that tool. So how has it been used? So the first thing is that through developing and then also assisting others in the use of this tool, we've first of all been supporting a political science project by ANU scholars, Darren Halpin, Anne-Sophie Cornelius-Nielsen and colleagues. In their project, they measure basically which interest groups appear or speak in Australian news. They have 2.3 million articles from 2016 to 2024. They've got their own workflow, which you actually see visualized here. I'm not going to go through this, but they've integrated the quotation tool into their own workflow. And so, I mean, I'm obviously not going to go into the findings from their project, but a little bit of things that they found was that only half of the mentioned groups were ever quoted. So that kind of shows that being in the news isn't the same as having a voice in the news. And they also were able to identify some kind of particular concentration of particular interest groups in the quotation. So the project overall really shows that if you distinguish voice, so the statements from the mentions, you can really see new dimensions of representational bias as far as interest groups are concerned in Australian news. And then you can scale that up further in terms of qualitative research. So the team so far has presented their work at Europe's largest annual gathering of political scientists, and they're currently working on a manuscript and probably also looking at a dedicated notebook for their particular workflow. Then we've also been using the tool to support a PhD project at University of Sydney that aimed to identify gender bias. Here working this one with 5 million words of AFL, NRL news coverage from Australia. The project looked at a range of gender stereotypes, but one of the things they were interested in was to look at stereotypes relating to emotions. So, for example, men being less emotional and certain emotions being gendered. And again, they used the quotation tool as one part of the toolbox that they were using in their project. So, for example, they were extracting quotes, all of the quotes that contain emotion words like love or excited, and then identified if the sources were female or male players. Again, just a little glimpse into the findings. Yes, overall, the quotes containing emotion words were twice as likely to come from female AFL and NRL players than from male players. So there's still some gender stereotyping going on. But more generally, really applying the tool in that project really showed that that can offer you a more nuanced approach to the representation of emotion and gender if you're also looking at reported speech. So this has resulted in a PhD thesis. You can look at this if you want to know more about the results, conference presentation, a blog post, and there's another paper in progress. Finally, the tool has also been used in an international collaboration that I was involved in, where I actually worked with the researcher who developed some of the code that we adapted for the tool. So from Canada, so together we analysed a whole year's worth of news from the CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, 32 million words, and we looked at identifying positive, negative sentiment in quoted versus non-quoted speech. So our hypothesis was, does quoted speech contain negative sentiment, and is it more subjective? So what we did there, again, we integrated the quotation tool with other things, in this case, natural language processing, specifically to bring in like a linguistic perspective. So overall, I think our collaboration there showed that, again, looking at this in a more nuanced way enhances sentiment analysis because you can really look at how sentiment and quotation are intertwined. So again, this has resulted in a conference presentation at international conference, a public blog post, and a paper. If you're interested in this, you can read up about this. So as you have seen from just these three little case studies, the data sets that researchers have been analysing are big, so ranging from like 5 million words in the PhD project to 32 million words in this collaboration, to then in that political science project, it was 2.3 million articles, which is actually about 990 million words. And so I'll now hand over to Michael, who will talk a little bit more about how LDaCA is enabling exactly this kind of data-intensive research. So over to you.
Okay, so next slide. So I promised some swearing, right? So I got to deliver on this. So the age-old question, right? Team Australia thinks it's potty-mouthed, right? You all think we're the best swearers in the world. The data says not. Okay, so let's go into it. So this is a project, and this is across two really large data sets. You can't complain. It was just some little qualitative study. It was a lot of data. Okay, so we've been working with collaborators from UQ itself, QT, Digital Observatory. I think a really nice example of crossover with Internet Observatory and what they're doing and how we work together, and also international collaborators in Eastern Finland. And it's a really interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary team. We've got people who do social network analysis type stuff. We have people who are bona fide computer scientists, because when you're dealing with data sets this large, you can't put it through a Corpus software, right? It'll break. And then linguists of different types, some of us qualitative, some of us quantitative. And we had support initially from a seed grant from UQ, but then we brought it into working with the LDaCA infrastructure. And I guess the findings, one study was looking at a corpus which has about 1.7 billion tokens in it. It's across 20 varieties of English, which is web data, right? So web data is essentially where you get off blogs and that kind of stuff, right? Or transcripts of TV shows, not scripted TV shows, but more like reality or chat shows, that kind of thing, which is not under copyright. And so they gather them together. And I guess a couple of key findings were not just which words are used, but which words are avoided. So in the UK, the C word is definitely avoided. In the US, a-hole and bloody, right? What's wrong with bloody? And I don't know if you remember a couple of decades ago, where the bloody hell are you? You can imagine how that sunk in the US, because that's a swear word you avoid, right? Yeah, exactly, right. Who were the most vulgar users? It was the Americans and the Brits. Team Australia, you've got to get your crap together. This is on blogs and chat shows, right? Then we were looking at Twitter sphere because we really thought, come on, Australians must be swearing the most. We all know it. It's true, right? So we looked onto Twitter sphere, now known as X, right? And we built essentially, and this is where you have the computational social network people, because you're trying to build a representative Twitter sphere of the Australian one, which I think through the Digital Observatory, we were able to work with them on that and create an equivalent American and Brits one. So don't ask me about the technicalities of building that, but it led to a very, very large corpus where you have to use natural language processing and so on to get into it. And again, I'm afraid the Australians are third place, bronze medal. The Americans come out on top again. They are more vulgar. There's more users. 52.9% of users use vulgar language at some point in time. And this was in the Biden years, by the way, when Trump wasn't president. That's surely gone up, right? So says the academic who's disconnected from, ordinary people. And then the greater, there's also a greater percentage of vulgar tweets as well. So nearly 5% contain it amongst Americans. So they're really going for it. But we're also looking, this is where the cross-disciplinary stuff is. So linguists would typically link it to things like gender and age and these kind of, I guess, things that are visibly presented identity characteristics. But, what you're talking about probably makes a difference as well. So topic. And what time of the day it is makes a difference too. And also in the Twitter kind of social media sphere, who you're connected to makes a difference. And what we found was there are different topics which are popular. So Australians tend to swear more, use more vulgar language when talking about the economy. The Brits, I don't know about this one, when they're talking about employment and immigration. So this is giving you a sense of something that's going on as well, right? There's a hint in public discourse about what's going on. Time of the day, obviously late at night is sometime that's quite popular amongst Americans and Brits. For Australians, the middle of the day. I don't know what people are doing. They're going off to lunch and, off they go. And when they come home from work. So remember employment, right? There's a bit of a theme here. This is vulgarity linked to our jobs, it seems. Another thing that we were looking at is non-standard orthography, right? Because when you're tweeting or posting on social media, you don't actually have to spell, properly. And we've found for the F word, which is the real F word, not the other one, that there's like hundreds of ways in which you can spell it. Or represent it. It's really quite astounding. And so because there's so many billions of tokens to go through, we have to use a sampling technique. But we found about 56% of incidents of the F word are actually using non-standard spelling. And I'm not talking about, dropping the G. or that kind of thing, much more non-standard. So it'd be, FCK, where you drop letters or you blend things. There's all sorts of hugely creative, and you can just add letters endlessly. See. So there's all sorts, and this is important because if you're trying to track hostility, all sorts of things online, you have to be really aware of how creative people are and when they're using these words. And of course, there's also slur terms and these kind of things, which are used quite creatively. Okay, so apparently nothing else we do captures the attention, but swearing does, right? It's interesting what captures the public attention. This really captured attention. Martin had a ball. He's German, and if you're a second language speaker, you really love swearing in your second language, right? It's awesome because you just don't feel it the same way. It's awesome. And so he's really enjoying himself, getting on TV and, doing his thing, talk about these things. So he went on national news, but it also went international. It really captured a lot of attention. We've got a couple of different papers. One of them's accepted and others under review. We're getting there with that. I'll probably skip that one. Another thing with this data-intensive humanities is we were looking at unparliamentary language in Hansard. Now, this started because we were doing a special issue on vulgarity. It's very hard to be vulgar in Parliament. There's rules around it, right? Actually, you're not supposed to swear. I think bloody is okay, but you're not supposed to use other bad language, right? There's strict rules around it. So how is it that, because everyone needs to behave badly sometimes, so how do you do this in Parliament? So we're really interested in looking at that. There's about 920 billion tokens. To give you a sense, if you're a person who actually reads stuff, that's more than 120 books, right? No one's going to sit there and read 120 books. We extracted out about 7,000 tokens where they were just using unparliamentary as a kind of a label for something that's happening in the parliamentary proceedings. There are about 7,500 tokens. That's about 2 books, right? If you're looking at the concordances. So no one's going to sit there and read 2 books. So the point being that if you want to do this kind of research, you really have to use a combination of corpus linguistic and NLP methods again. We did kind of document similarity analysis. We found all sorts of different clusters. And we focused on the connection between unparliamentary and racist because it emerged later in the record. It's kind of started right the 1960s, 70s, right? It's not to say people were not racist in Australia before 1960. I mean, that's obviously not the case, but it became part of this is unparliamentary. And what's very interesting in the Australian context when we dug into it, it's not being racist that's unparliamentary, it's calling someone racist as unparliamentary. Interesting, right? But another thing that I think emerged from our study, right, Simon, was all the different clusters that came out. There were things really clustering around social media, which were very recent. There were things that obviously went over time, which are to do with the procedural rules. But there were all sorts of clusters where we felt, even in our multidisciplinary team, were beyond us to analyse, actually. And we realised you need to get in political historians. You need to get in all sorts of people with different knowledges. You need digital communications people to really be able to do this analysis. You can't understand what's going on in Hansard through one discipline. You just can't. And so it's really a call for this kind of multidisciplinary type of analysis. So we had some initial findings here, and this went into the media, but apparently people are not so excited about politicians behaving badly as just ordinary Australians swearing, which they really love. Another application here is with industry. So we're working with Water Trust Australia, which is a peak body looking at water rights and so on. And this was a report written by the then CEO of Water Trust, where they were really interested in dealing with submissions to public inquiries. Now, how do you make sense of it? We just saw an example, if we're talking inside, NCRIS just released more than 220 submissions that were put in March in PDFs. What the hell are you going to do with 220 PDFs, right? oh, you come to LDaCA, here we can help you, right? So the first thing, of course, is you have to go to MDAP, get those PDFs put into something a bit more tractable, and then you can do something like topic modeling or sentiment analysis. If you want to kind of get a sense across, the advantage of this kind of methodology, NLP, versus using LLMs is it is really reproducible. There are ways to make LLMs reproducible, but it's a bit technically complicated at the moment. So this is a key question. But if you're just trying to get a sense of it, this was their mapping. Okay, when they're making submissions about water policy, what are the different interest groups here connecting into, right? So whether it's Indigenous controlled organisations making submissions, is it farmer organisations, is it just Mad Joe Blow from the public making a submission, right? Sorry. But do you know what I mean? All sorts of people, what kind of topics is they settling in on? And so it's to give industry partners who are interested in policy, who are trying to work through public inquiries and all that material in a systematic way, actually tools to do that, right? Otherwise, surely they're just reading them and picking out favorite quotes. How else could you do it? So those are just some of our examples of working across, we think, quite a few broad partners. I wanted to hand to Moises and Robert, who are going to take us through repurposing, reusing language, data, and tech with another.
Thank you, Michael and Monika. So I'm just going to start quickly with just some examples of how are we reusing and repurposing language data. I'm going to start with the tech. So this is the ARDS bird stories. There's a website that was created by Theresa Ryder and Margaret Carroll through the ARDS language office at the Batchelor Institute in Alice Springs. Theresa was a respected ARDS artist, well known for her watercolor landscapes. She was also a language teacher with a long career in ARDS education and resource production. So there was an app made for a phone, but that, of course, the phone's app don't last. So this work was led by Ben Foley, and he gave the pillars treatment. And by doing that, he had to redo the consent publishing. So then this was then published as an old school website, like a static website. That means there's no database, and it will last a long time. It has your URL creating your data, and will last for a long time. Thank you. And another example of the work we're doing is with the ARDS Aboriginal Corporation and the Bachelor's Call Collection that Michael was and Robert was talking about. This work is being led by the LDaCA team and the ARDS team by creating a metadata schema, basing and extending a schema.org and the work of the LDaCA schema done by Peter, and around trying to reuse the schema, building a specific schema for reuse. We will then model a profile that will describe how the data is structured and how it's going to be described for that particular purpose. And so another example is the work being done by promoting arrow crates and some of the stack. So we have so Donald Hovern from the Australian Plant Phenomics comes to our regular drop-in session calls, Zoom calls. Their work involves in experimenting crops and monitor crop performance. They are interested in data management and currently investigating our portal stack. Michael Milton from WeHi is using data systems using ArrowCrate to Omero. Omero is an open microscopy environment. I will describe images, and he's developing ArrowCrate tools, and he's interested in our linked data collection previews. And James Love from Auckland and the Center of E-Research, they developed a method for granular encryption of any given metadata element, preserving the ArrowCrate's standards. And I'll hand over to Rob to talk about more about the language reuse.
Thank you. So I just have a few other examples to show you of this, I guess, the way in which we're applying a lot of this work. This example looks at what we call person-centered collections, and it's pretty exciting. It's a way of organising and governing language and cultural data that I guess keeps people and communities who are connected to the data at the centre of it. Now, this is important because often language recordings or texts have been treated as isolated research objects. And instead, this approach is really around recognising the speakers and the knowledge holders within the data, but also to the relationships that really give that data life and give it meaning. So this is a bit of a showcase or a celebration around those peoples and those communities, and a more engaging way for actual community members to engage with their own data. So this method sort of also ensures that, I guess, the people and the places are connected to it. The example I give you, it looks at the life work of Monika Dobson AM, who is an Eastern Aranda elder, a linguist, an educator, and also an ecologist. And her work spans language documentation, teaching, botany, ethnobiology, and also cultural land care. What I'm going to do though, and I hope it works, is I've got a recording, and Mrs. Dobson's daughter, Camille, she works with the Batchelor Institute, and she shares this, I guess, nice recount of her experience of this process and engaging with it.
Orda, Aridni Jenna Camille Dobson, Mia Jenna Veronica Brola Dobson, Aranda Iknaribana Nganja. My name is Camille Dobson. My mother is Monika Dobson. We are Eastern Aranda language speakers. I would like to firstly acknowledge the Larrakia people who are the traditional custodians of Garamilla, Darwin. So this project is called Aina Ingerika Apudla Ilama, which translates into Gathering All Things Together, which was a collaboration between the LDaCA team and the Centre for Australian Languages and Linguistics. I'm not a very technical person, but I have an interest in archiving, and this project is a little bit about archiving, but also a lot about some of the technical stuff. So I didn't understand much about the technical stuff. When people talked about Dropbox, iClouds, RO crates, it made me feel very nervous. But the LDaCA team, particularly Ben Foley, helped me grow my understanding in this area. However, from the outset, I understood the idea of a person-centred collection and was honoured when my mum was selected to be the Aboriginal person at the centre of the collection. I knew my mum had worked for over 50 years of her life and contributed a great amount to the Aranda language, and through this project I had the opportunity to learn more about the technical side. Aboriginal people like my mother have been major contributors to the recording and sharing of Aboriginal culture, language and other knowledge in many contexts, including language preservation, ecological science, education and so on. But often they are separated from their knowledge, becoming a footnote or reference in someone else's academic paper. In October last year, we had Mum's 80th birthday celebration, and as part of that, we wanted to find a way to celebrate her work by bringing the collection together. Unfortunately, we did not meet this deadline, but an amazing launch was held at the beginning of 2025, and there was over 100 people that attended. Before I started this project, I knew about some of the work that Mum had done, but quickly discovered that I had no idea just about how much she had actually done. My search for her work took me to the Institute of Aboriginal Development, IAD, where Mum had worked during the 70s into the 90s. I was excited to find a box labelled Dictionary Projects and a bundle of yellowing papers handwritten in pencil in Mission English, a mixture of capital and lowercase letters, and spelling swapping D's, B's and T's, and so on. These were the handwritten entries that my mother had created for the Eastern and Central Aranda to English Dictionary. It dawned on me that these documents should be digitised and preserved, and I volunteered to archive with the IAD team, and in a short time uncovered a treasure trove of Mum's work. We invite you to visit the website veronicadobson.au. The website brings together the story of Mum's life's work and achievement. The website includes recordings of stories, lists of publications, and links to some of the resources or descriptions on where they are located. Thank you for listening. I hope you have a great conference.
So Camille works for the Batchelor Institute, and one of her main roles is around working with and managing that very large call collection. That's their responsibility. The next project I want to share with you is quite a pretty cool one. It's a little bit different. This was done with our partners at ARNet and also our colleague Rose Barracliff, who the title of this one was around Reconnecting Indigenous Data to Country. And the aim of the project was around reconnecting botanical specimens that were held in the global herbaria. And now this collection is belongs to the New York Botanical Gardens. It's in their data set. So what she ended up doing, data that was taken from Australia and resides in this data set. So what they have done is they've extracted, so of the extracted specimen data, Rose and Alex from ARNet and some of the LDaCA team have worked with the geolocation metadata that exists within that collection, and they've been therefore able to identify where these specimens were collected from in Australia. From there, they used geospatial data sets, things like the native title map and like the Horton map and other linguistic data sets to view the Australian continent and map that data back to where it belongs using the geospatial metadata that was contained in that. So they were able to recover missing geolocation data from various descriptions, and were able to add over 3,000 findable records, which was quite impressive. And so then they've been able to enrich that data and then send that back to the New York Botanical Gardens catalogue. And so now this has been able to be more findable and discoverable for Indigenous communities to find out the language names that were contained to the specimens that were taken from their country. So that was another example of just some, I guess, the ingenuity, I guess, that you can, how far you can stretch language technology and the value that that comes from that. So that was another one. And I guess in wrapping up this session, I think that's been the theme of our showcase is really the need for upscaling and the replicability of the technical infrastructure that we are building. Yes, there's the linguistic elements of it, but then there's, as Michael said at the start, language or common language that often is the basis of much of the data that we're working with too. So there's an enormous potential in terms of where do these technologies start and where do they finish. I think that is ongoing, and that is something that was clear in the conversations yesterday, and I hope that that continues into the conversations tomorrow. But in closing, I guess I want to bring it back to the importance of data and people at the center of that data. And for us, it's about designing HAS infrastructure that is reusable and is beneficial across various disciplines, and also research infrastructure that meets many different needs to many different communities. But in closing, I want to I guess I want to evoke that old man there who gives his apologies, but he has come to, Uncle Michael Williams, he has come to a few of these HAS and I symposiums now. And maybe 2 years ago, I think he did a plenary at the end of the sessions. And one of the things he really talked about from an Indigenous point of view was the importance of communities. He said, we need to be able to see ourselves in the infrastructure that you are building. And he offered that as a provocation to the room. And I think a lot of conversation followed thereafter in that session. So I guess in building from that, I just want to stress that the success of what we do at LDaCA, it not only involves meeting a diverse range of needs, but it's also about those researchers and communities seeing themselves in the infrastructure that we're building collectively, the HAS and I infrastructure that we're all contributing to. So with that, I hope you enjoyed that showcase to see, how we extend out beyond just linguistics. And I thank you for your time. Are we doing questions?
Holy bloody shit, Michael. That was a very entertaining, energetic presentation. Are there any questions that you'd like to present? And you can't swear in Italiano, capito?
Going back to the topic modeling, so you mentioned that LLMs not their output is not replicable, and so you use NLP instead. But as far as I know, it really depends on which algorithm you're using. So topic modeling usually can give different results according to different parameters, or even the same parameters, because most, I would say, the majority of algorithms are non-deterministic.
Yeah. So I think I said that you can get replicability with LLMs, but technically it's more difficult for the user, right?
Oh, yeah. But still,
But it's still possible, yes. So I think that's kind of the future where we're working. But I think Monika, you've got
Yeah, sorry, just Martin Schweinberger. He developed a way of doing the topic modeling that makes it replicable.
Yeah. So, I mean, when we're doing it, the tools we have is you make it really clear that, of course, you set the number of parameters and that kind of thing. So the key point is that you can replicate it. So that's what we're aiming for. Well, I wasn't trying to say, this one's better than the other one, right? It's just what resources are available to people and the compute that's required. Do you want to be uploading your research data into commercial LLMs? There's all sorts of questions I think we're going to work through.
Okay, thanks.
Mine's a quick question about, that users, so how do you find, or how do users find you? So you've got a lot of different community groups and you're obviously identifying some partners to work with and whatnot. But say, for example, those so-called idiosyncratic projects, they're not, in that list of people that have come, that you've worked with in different sorts of scenarios. How are they coming to you? How do they know to work with you?
Well, all different ways, they're being, it's being exposed is not the word, but it's being uncovered in the data that comes to us when we're in our perceived role as a data custodian, however long term that is, our role to hold it for any period of time until we work out what needs to be done with it. So they're within the data, they're within our sort of business as usual as we're going out to different community groups and researchers through the networks that we're developing. And it's also to a conscious thought in two ways. HAS and Indigenous, we're both contributing to building, a competent and sustainable ecosystem or ecosystems of researchers and users and the rest of it. And in many ways, those two worlds coexist and intersect as well. So it's a conscious thought in who we're reaching out with. And it's built upon could even be that snowballing effect. It's built upon like our relationship with institutions and those who hold data and the connections that they have. And so it's been quite, notwithstanding our own partners, you know, we have 101 work packages in terms of the things that we're covering from a project management point of view with LDaCA, and that naturally involves a lot of users. There's very little work packages that you can just do in isolation. So it's hard to give one answer because it's sort of ingrained everywhere. Do you want to elaborate on that at all?
Maybe an example is the researchers using this data know that they have some collections that they want to make accessible. So they come to us and say, we need to have, for example, there's a collection called Ostok, and we say, please make this available. And so we're working on doing that. So they come to us and then we start to building schemas and profiles and stuff, and then we just push it through. That's one example.
Just go to Simon.
I think it's very important to keep in mind the crucial role that people like Monika and Michael play in this process, that they're doing cool research and other people are looking at it and saying, yeah, I wouldn't mind doing some of that as well. And I think that's also the kind of idea that we have behind the Graduate Digital Research Fellowship, that we can have ambassadors going out there saying, yeah, we've talked about these issues, how you work within a data-intensive way, what kind of tools there are. We've talked about them in detail. We can do things like this, and we can show other people that we can do them as well.
Thank you. I'm Alison Vaughan. I'm the collections manager at the Herbarium in Melbourne, and I do have some meetings with Rose lined up soon. But one of the things that and that question that Kylie asked is really like, I'm finding out about this because I'm going out of my way to find out about what's happening in this space, because we've got not only the like New York Botanic Gardens plants collected on country that are cultural objects in themselves. A lot of ours have explicit cultural knowledge, really significant collections of plant names that are extra valuable because they've got the plant with them, so you know what they belong with, and a lot of examples of cultural use as well. So I'm really keen to talk to you about what, you know, if there's a place for this data in LDaCA, or and also how you go about those steps. I guess putting it in LDaCA is one thing, but making sure community knows about it, because we've got this from all over the continent. So yeah, I'm really keen to, I guess, talk more about that, and be great to do some of that herbarium work with the Australian Herbaria as well.